So Jack's waiting for the weather to come up to fly his home-built Pete and Paul air camper all the way from South Carolina to Broadhead, Wisconsin for the annual fly-in there. Wow, did the content for this segment become difficult? Well, I said that today would be the day that we messed around with the trimmers. However, I got one of the most intelligent posts on the comments concerning the speed bar that I have seen since I started this PPG experience. I had promised that this video would be primarily about trimmer adjustments and the differences in flight characteristics from one trimmer setting to the other. One of my commenters has convinced me that I should use the speed bar first. Even though I haven't documented the trimmer use, I have used the trimmers quite a bit, and I used them successfully to traverse some windy area where I was not quite parked but going a lot slower than I wanted to, and they were very helpful in that situation. I was up high. I wasn't particularly maneuvering. It was a straight line portion of the flight. But his compelling arguments have convinced me to delay a little more trimmer usage and instead talk about and configure the speed bar portion of the wing. The poster was very articulate, and he seemed to indicate that there were several reasons to hook the speed bar up and get used to using the speed bar prior to the trimmers and build skills with the speed bar, because in his impression, the speed bar is a safer way to increase speed by reducing lift, which reduces drag. So I thought, well, it's not going to hurt anything. Hung the whole device up here from the hangar door like we did back in video 3 or 4 when I figured out my center of gravity and hang points. So here's the other concern. This is the speed bar system. As it came from Para, it did not come with any means of retraction. So I think the way Para intended it to work was for it to be reasonably taut between its deployment point through these inline pulleys on this particular harness. This is that APCO harness, and run through both pulleys up to the wing, or up past the carabiner hooking point, and then up past the riser, and then the circlips or sister clips or whatever they're called would connect out in front like that, and everything would stay out to the front side of the system. The problem is I have these very long legs, and to deploy from this position would be rather uncomfortable. Pull this all the way out to my leg length and then deploy resulted in the problem of not being able to get the trapeze back into the position that it needed to be in for landing. And I was worried that this would catch on unimproved terrain or tree stumps or whatever and cause me to face plant, and I wouldn't be comfortable with that so much as if it was retracted back here. So I came up with some 1/8" bungee shock cord material. Temporarily, I'm going to try that for lack of better advice. Now, there seems to be some lack of consensus on this. Not everybody thinks that paramotors need to even use the speed bar system. In fact, I've been told by a couple people, don't even bother with it. It's for pylon racing. I've had a couple people tell me, don't bother with it, you'll never need it. And I already see the benefit to being able to penetrate more headwind on windy days. The real important thing from my understanding, is not that you are sure to get full deployment of this. In other words, as this is compressed on the A's and pulls the two pulleys down on the A's, and then through this system here of ratioing, half of the A reduction is translated to the B reduction, or the concern is to make sure that when this is not deployed, you're imparting zero pull between these two pulleys so that the wing retains its original certificated B shape, and that was without any speed bar deployment. Now, unlike the brakes, these need to be set up for each individual pilot's height and leg length and preference. So this isn't a tab that I'm going to leave on there permanently. When I get the right length, I'll measure it and I'll record it in the manual so that I remember what it is if I need to reference it or replace the lines if the lines ever get worn. I also figured that the best way to get full travel on this speed bar system, however I ultimately end up getting it hooked up, is on my shock cord line to have it tied to the speed bar just like the deployment line does, and then transit a pulley and be double distance. Now this stuff has got about 130% stretch capability, so I've got about maybe 20 inches or so total between the up portion and the down portion of that line. So stretched out, that's 48 inches before I start getting to the elasticity limits of this nylon cord. Last thing, they make these really nice servings. The Mac Paracord that came with the speed bar is served back on top of itself and stitched together. So with the elastic shock cord, bungee brand, whatever you want to call it, in the larger diameters they make some really cool little plastic clips, and this isn't a critical component. Yeah, you don't want to get it caught in the propeller on landing or catch a tree stump with this round loop, but those plastic adjustable ends can help you configure this shock cord in lots of different shapes and sizes, and they're pretty sturdy. They can either clip on here just like the served cord does, or they make terminal ends that you can put a screw in. And I got some of those on the way too, so ultimately I'll be reconfiguring this with new cord, new shock cord. I got my prop bolts drilled and wired, so I don't have to concern myself with them vibrating or falling out. Now, earlier I had promised myself that I would be switching to a carbon fiber propeller as long as I hadn't damaged this wooden one, and I just made the PayPal payment to get the carbon fiber prop, so I'll probably be replacing this wiring, but that's basically what I did. There's a lot to drilling those little bolts. You'd think, oh, it's easy, we'll just drill through the bolt heads. So, although I had originally built a drilling jig, I found that just physically holding the cap bolts on a V-block like this at the drill press was plenty good enough, and I used a technique called peck drilling. Found a little video clip of what peck drilling is, so there's that. If you can see in there, the wires actually are visible, which means that the drilling was held out to the front face of the bolt to not compromise the structural integrity of the bolt, so that it's less drilling, number one, and then number two, you leave the meat of the bolt portion that's inside of the swedged relief for the Allen key undrilled. So try the peck drilling if you're one of those guys that has access to CNC machining equipment. I think it's a G83 code to repetitively drill in small increments, and that allows a couple things to happen. The bit cools between each drilling touch and the friction, the chips clear, and it gives you an opportunity to put a little cutting fluid in there. So I finally got the selfie stick out, messed around with it a little bit, and then I got the bright idea that lake in the background there over my left shoulder, that I wanted to fly over that thing, but I needed a chase boat, or I needed some sort of reassurance that if I ended up with an engine failure, I had some help. I also figured it would be a perfect opportunity to use this speed bar. So I went to Google Earth and I studied the map and I picked out a routing. Then I briefed my youngest son. He was going to follow me on the Wave Runner for a little bit, and I was going to accomplish that goal. He had an extra PFD, and I had the water-activated flotation system on the Paramotor. And I limited my time, stayed near shore, and got a chance to get my neighbors a peek at the paraglider over the water. Unfortunately, we missed getting any video.
Is that you on the Wave Runner?
The problem with this particular lake is not that there's not landing zones around the lake, and there's not. It's the tree line border that extends for 3/4 of a mile on any direction away from the shoreline. You might be tempted at first glance to say, well, you could always ride down onto the road that surrounds the lake there if you were near the shoreline. And you just can't. All of the secondary roads are lined with huge power lines, and all of the tertiary roads that lead back into the subdivisions are just tree lined and overhung with trees and just very, very crowded and dangerous. Not safe landing zones. The best bet would be somebody's private yard or ditching into shallow water.
All right, follow me out here.
In any event, I had a very enjoyable time flying around over the smooth water and the smooth air above the water, and made a couple circles, waved to a couple neighbors, some of whom expected me to be flying by. And on climb out, after playing around on the lake for a little bit, I caught a view of two of my buddies flying their champs like they do almost every evening. This is where having made the decision to carry the aviation radio along with me really paid off. I heard these guys talking about me and saying that they were looking for me, talking amongst themselves that one had seen me and was pointing me out to the other, his wingman. And I knew that they were keeping me in view, and I waved to them and they saw me waving to them, and even after they landed, I had a chance to go over to their hangar and talk with them and thank them for keeping an eye out for me.
There's the champs. Hello, champs. I heard them on the radio. They had me. So here's the speed bar. You can see it pulls these pulleys together. At least I hope you can see that. And it brings the front of the wing down. It's also a comfortable place to rest your feet. And it makes you cruise a little faster.
Most of my discussion about the speed bar use in flight was pretty unintelligible. I will say this, the speed bar is useful, but for the Mac Paracharger wing, I don't feel it's as useful as the trimmers. One of the concerns was that the use of the trimmers requires both hands and a diversion of your attention to flying to readjust the trimmers. The bottom line is that the usefulness and the effectiveness of the speed bar pales in comparison with the trimmers on the Mac Paracharger wing. But now that I have it rigged, I'll hook it up for all subsequent flights, and I may even use the speed bar in conjunction with reflex trim. But you can bet I will adhere to the instructions in the manual to only use the wingtip steering system and stay off of the main brakes. The risk of pilot-induced wing collapse goes up exponentially with both systems and main brakes.